Brett, what'd you think of the movie Challengers?
Challengers. Well, I mean, as you can tell from my outfit, I went into this screening, into this week, really wanting to like Challengers. I liked the marketing campaign. I liked the trailer. I liked the way everyone was looking.
Okay.
But I'm going to tell you, Joe, this might be the one. This might be the review where you say, all right, Grandpa, you've had a good run, but it's time to stop talking.
This review?
It's this review I'm about to do.
Are you sure it wasn't
this one?
Previous episode?
What, Civil War?
Yeah.
I think I came
Wait,
out
hold
on
on
that
now. Hold
one
on now.
smiling.
So what you're setting up right now is that you did not like this movie?
I'm just telling you, this might be the review.
I'm going to be quiet.
It might be the review.
I want to hear what's up.
Where you put me on a barge and set me on fire and push me out into the sea. And everyone says something nice about me, but this might be the review where everyone says he's lost touch. He's out of touch.
Wow. Okay. Well, or you're
maybe. Maybe my instincts are sharper than ever.
Oh.
Maybe I'm actually at the top of my fucking game. You be the judge, but either way,
I'm sitting back.
I am here to tell you that Challengers ain't got it where it counts, baby. And when I say it, I mean that indescribable brand of cool, sexy spectacle that Hollywood lives on like the undead vampire that it is. Challengers thinks it has it. It wants you to think it has it. It does not have it. The best way I can summarize this empty exercise in style, and Joe had a little inkling of where I was going to go with this review, and I feel like was subtly sabotaging my review in his review.
It's a miracle how much I didn't say in my review. But you go ahead. I'm going to sit here and take notes. I brought a pen this episode.
The best way I can summarize this empty exercise in style is that it reaches its climax in the first minute or two of the movie. The film is never more potent than in the opening sequence, and I was on board from the beginning. I was having a ball because there is a sequence that opens the movie where this sort of out-of-the-way, nothing, low-stakes tennis tournament in New Rochelle is suddenly transformed before your eyes into this hyper-stylized heaven of pure cinema. Oh my God, Atticus Ross, Trent Reznor, the pounding, moody EDM comes in. It has a little more club in it, though, than their like Fincher soundtracks, which I liked. It has a little more beat to it. That starts coming in. Zendaya enters. She's looking like Gen Z Faye Dunaway. She's so cool. She sits down center court. This camera just starts swooping like a fucking eagle across the court. Everything is happening, and I am entranced, baby. I am at the club, and it is the 90s all over again. I'm tripping my ass off watching Challengers, and I love it. But the reason it's working for me in these opening moments is because the dynamics between all the characters are still cryptic to us. The history is unknown. We know there is some sort of tension hanging in the air between our three principals, but we don't know what it is. And so the hyper-stylization acts as this really exciting prophecy of what's to come, a sort of overture to the movie, an abstract overture for the movie we're about to see. But the movie that is promised by that opening sequence, something tense and seductive and intricate in its construction, is not the movie that is ultimately delivered. And the movie for me never reached the heights, never reached what ended up being for me the climactic heights of the opening minute of the movie, because the more that we learn about the characters and the story and the history, and it's jumping around in time and all aiming towards we know there's some sort of fundamental act of betrayal or something that splits apart this threesome. And as we get to it, the movie actually loses tension for me, loses stakes, because I felt that the performances ultimately were uninspired. I thought the directing was just sort of wacky and directionless. And I felt like the story was not as compelling as it thought it was. And specifically, I thought the sex in the movie, despite all the fucking hullabaloo all over Twitter, I thought the sex was kind of blah and not really that sexy. Challengers aspires to Almodovar levels of daytime TV as high art, but it ends up way closer to the daytime TV than the high art. This is like a very special episode of Saved by the Bell, the one where AC Slater teaches Zach Morris how to jack off.
Fuck you.
Fassbinder also seems to be an influence here. I don't know about that. Maybe if Fassbinder had survived,
was
and
Fassbinder really an influence on famous queer filmmaker Luca Guadagnino,
and maybe but it's not a comparison that helps Guadagnino at all, because the only Fassbinder that this is like is the Gatorade commercials he would have been roped into directing to pay for his coke habit if he had lived past 40. Not any of the ones that we actually have in his filmography. The closest contemporary comparison, I think, to Guadagnino's style here in Challengers is Paolo Sorrentino, the director of The Great Beauty, The Young Pope, etc. But whereas the stylistic touches in The Great Beauty work for me at a very deep level because Sorrentino roots those stylistic touches in character and culture and performance, Challenger tries to lay those stylistic touches over some very uninspired performances and confused direction, like some kind of Instagram filter, in the hopes that cool will just magically happen somehow, and it doesn't, at least not for me. This movie reminds me of if when Soderbergh went to edit The Limey in post-production, he didn't find what he was looking for. We talked 2 weeks ago on Weekend at Bergman's about how Soderbergh's The Limey, which I think also provides an interesting analog for talking about Challengers. Soderbergh got into the editing room and had sort of a linear noir and didn't like what he was seeing, and so he starts chopping it up. He starts adding in these interesting sort of unexpected musical cues. He starts adding sort of, actual footage of the actors. He starts really playing around with it in post and found an incredible movie within the footage that he didn't like. To me, Challengers feels like that kind of movie. It feels like a movie that when they got into the editing room, whether or not this was the intention, they start chopping it off. There's all these time jumps, but the time jumps are so confusing. They have to put so much freaking text on the screen. I felt like I was like looking through a newspaper half the time to watch the movie. In addition, while the EDM was very the Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross, that what essentially became the theme song of Challengers.
Yeah, it's called a score.
The first time I heard it, really, because I thought a score had some sort of variety and rhythm to it, not just the same song pounded over and over again into your skull in order to blind you to the movie's flaws and to apparently obscure some of the dialogue. Because although I liked it the first time it came in, and I'll say the second and third time, by the 8th time they were playing that song, I was like, please, what is happening here? And they would even bring it in over like the ends of scenes that had important dialogue, and I couldn't hear the freaking dialogue. I'm leaning forward in my seat. I'm looking over at the only other person up in the balcony saying, Did you hear what Mike Feist just said? I can't. It seemed important. I think it was somebody's name. I don't know. They didn't know either because nobody could hear anything. So whereas this worked for the Limey, to me, the Challengers was a should have fixed it in pre-movie because you didn't find what you were looking for in post. Let's talk about the performances and why I don't like them. Mike Feist should be known as the guy with the best bone structure in your local community theater, not as Hollywood's next big thing.
Brett. Like even that one. Look at Brett. Put the camera on Brett. He knows that one is a little extra. He loved it though. All right, I'll give you that.
All right, come on.
Say it again.
All right. You want to hear one more time?
Take it from the top. Yeah.
All right. Mike Feist should be known as the guy with the best bone structure in your local community theater, not as Hollywood's next big thing. Now, before you say you don't agree with that, out of the 3 principals, who do you think, who was your least favorite performance?
I think Zendaya.
Really?
Out of the 3, and I thought they were all good.
Interesting. Okay,
but Face, it's between her and Mike
and her Face. Okay,
Josh, I like the best.
Yeah, well, he had the most to do. He got to be the bad boy. He got to be the villain.
Right.
I think Face and Zendaya did not get good direction in this movie. I think they were told to be, particularly in the sort of later timeline in the movie, I think they were told to be sort of icy, emotionless, and I think that is a hard note for younger actors. And to me, what I was getting was just sort of nothing. To me, Face gave a sort of blah performance. He looks incredible. The sweat dripping off his face is incredible. Yeah. All of that is great. The performance to me was blah. Josh O'Connor is doing an impression of bad boy charisma, but it couldn't seduce a loaf of bread.
Tell it to your wife, asshole.
Much less the baddest woman on the planet. And I'm talking about Tashi Duncan, not Zendaya, who we'll get to in a second. Josh O'Connor, I think, and look, I can't blame the guy for this, but it was a classic British guy trying to do like a cool American character, and you get a lot of that in the performance. You get a lot of like he's trying to pull from like young Mickey Rourke, he's trying to pull from young like new Hollywood bad boys, and I just don't think that's what that guy does as an actor. I loved him in The Crown when he's playing dumb little Prince Charles. I loved that. He was very good at that. But bad boy charisma, I don't think that's where Josh O'Connor lives. I wasn't really feeling it from him. Zendaya is very cool and very sexy. She, again, looks like a Gen Z Faye Dunaway in these outfits. I thought among the three, although I did not like her performance, I thought among the three, she played the best within Guadagnini's style. But I don't want to see Zendaya used as a prop. I thought, which ultimately is what I felt like she was being used as. Her performance, the problem I had with it, and again, this could have gone back to the direction and how she was sort of directed to do the performance, but the performance lacked the kind of nuance that turns dialogue into a credible human being. And specifically, she has a problem for me getting from A to B, where you're starting at emotion A. You're horny, and then you're trying to get to B. You're pissed off because something just happened, right? Some sort of problem in the relationship just surfaced. And she just goes always straight from A to B. There's not that sort of gradient sort of in between that gets you from A to B. And then when she's in moments of crisis and confusion, when she's feeling three things at once, I don't see that in her face. I don't see her feeling three things at once. That thing that great actors can do where they're giving you a layered performance and you believe the tension because you can see them wrestling with an experience. I don't see that from Zendaya. Her performance to me happened in blocks of emotion. She's this, then she's this, then she's this, then she's this. But it did not have the sort of nuance or layering that I look for in a really compelling performance. Like I said, I found the sex to be blah, although props to the marketing team for somehow convincing all of the internet that we had never heard of threesomes before. I don't know why everyone is like all going crazy and goo goo gaga Looney Tunes eyes as though this is the sexiest movie on the face of the earth. I mean, seriously, I kind of fell into it. I was like, the threesome scene is going to be so hot.
It was.
But at the end of the day, it was. It wasn't. It was not. It thought it was hot, but to me, this is This is the first sort of backlash of this sort of like Gen Z what is it, like sort of a Gen Z sort of like prudishness around sex, or sort of like a yes. Sort of like sex as like
post Me Too puritanical,
over stylized like performance, but not like I could not.
This movie is about foreplay.
Let's just say that all the sweat happens on the tennis court and not in the bedroom.
Right, that's almost like it's the fucking point of the movie. That is the point of the movie. The sex is the tennis, which is said in the dialogue.
No, you mean the tennis is the sex.
Thank you. Sorry, excuse me.
Okay, the tennis
is the sex. And literally, when he puts you in the ball at the end and you're just getting pounded by the two boys back and forth, that's what we're fucking paying for. Tennis is the sex.
All right, let's go off of that then, because I like that as a premise. I like that on paper. What gets in the way of really experiencing that to me is that this guy, I don't know, I'd have some anxiety that not enough was happening, or some sort of sense that like I've got to do more and more and more. This guy's pulling so many camera tricks out of his bag, and half of them to me didn't work. I love some of the big swoopy moves with the camera. I hated when this turned into a first-person shooter for the big climactic tennis match. Literally, you're like, it's like the camera gets strapped to the tennis players, and you're seeing like through their eyes, and then you see the racket come up. It's literally like playing a first-person shooter. It made no sense for this movie, for this plot and these characters and the situation. It made no sense, and it didn't do a lot for the sex as tennis thing. To me, the sort of pounding of the ball back and forth, that I started to see what you're saying. But I'm not going to give a movie credit for just thinking of a theme. It needs to execute the theme, and to me, it did not execute that theme of like the tennis is where they work out their sexual frustration because they're too embarrassed to do it in real life, or whatever, or there's too much.
Well, it's all the same.
Or they do too much tennis that their bodies are these like fucking
obsessed.
Athletic temples, and sex becomes some sort of dilution of their perfectionism, their athletic perfectionism, so they have to fuck on the court. I love that as a theme. I just don't think that theme was executed because the camera, to me, started to feel just sort of directionless and just constantly sort of there wasn't to me like a lot of consistency in the style. It was like, let's just try a lot of different stylistic touches and see if any of them work. I was also shocked considering how beautiful the movie is and considering how amazing that like you get that little cold open before the sequence love of their isolated faces
before the MGM logo comes out. It's pretty cool.
And I sat in my seat and I've said, this is going to be the best movie I've ever seen. That like it had such promise to me out of that opening sequence.
It was
but
cool.
They weren't able to me to build sort of story and character to make the visuals really to ground the visuals in some sort of meaning that was interesting to me or that I could follow or read into. And this movie, despite that, had a surprising lack of like iconic shots. For a movie that seems to constantly be going for iconic shots, it had a surprising lack of them, and there were some that came so close, and I'm just like, why didn't you just like sort of frame that better and like and be patient? There's such a lack of patience in terms of the way shots are structured because he's trying to jump to the next big sort of camera trick. You know, it's like can I just get like 2 more seconds of seeing like a wide shot of Zendaya sitting in the crowd because he looks amazing before you strap the camera to the fucking tennis ball, please?
The last minute of a 2 hour and 15-minute long movie.
Now this is where we get to it, because the irony of the movie is that although I think he's doing too much, and the movie is kind of frenetic in how much the camera is moving around, this guy, I mean, I read that he doesn't like sports movies and didn't like sort of know a lot about sports movies.
No, he doesn't like tennis because of the way that they film it.
Got it. But I was also reading that he wasn't like a real fan of sports movies, though.
Okay,
I think that's believable,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
Well, to me, it's totally believable in the way this movie is played out, because one of the key things in sports movies, right, is like the last second shot. Every sports movie is working towards like a last second shot scenario, right? And the way that you make that last second shot interesting is the hard work of a sports movie, and I think the undervalued part of a sports movie is getting the logistics of the game right, getting up to the final shot so that the audience is sort of on board for that final shot and has been following the back and forthness of the match. But this big climactic match is cut up into 20 different pieces, and then you're constantly going back and forth in time in and out of this match. The match itself is not presented with any real sort of clarity, even though there's constant text on the screen of like first set, second set, third set, match point, tiebreaker, etc. It did not have the flow to me of an effective sports movie where you can follow the sort of back and forthness. It would literally just cut back to the main match, the climactic match of the whole movie, and it's just like somebody gets an ace, and it's like the set's over, they won that set, and I was like, oh, they did? Okay, so like where are we now? Like, okay, it's 1-1. The movie, the big climactic tennis match did not have. It was sort of like just too cut up. But then when we get to the last second shot, when we get to the match point tiebreaker part of it, the thing slows down to the crawl of a mouse,
right?
And then we're just sitting there forever. Well, I didn't like it. I don't care if it's the point. We're sitting there forever waiting for them to hit the ball, and then they do this thing that I will not give away because it's a spoiler, but they do a callback to a thing earlier in the movie. I saw it 4 minutes before it happened because this movie's going so slow.
I saw it when they did it in Act 1.
And then when they did it, they did it as though it's like, aha, remember this? And I was like, yes. Of course I remember this. I knew you were going to do it 4 minutes ago. Hit the fucking ball already, okay? It is, I guess, what are you going to say, Joe? It's like edging as tennis as edging,
no,
sex
tennis as
tennis,
sex,
and blah, blah, blah. That's great on paper. It didn't happen for me on the screen. There were 2 scenes that I liked, and here's why I liked them. There was 2 sex scenes that I thought were effective. There was a scene in a dorm room where Josh O'Connor and Zendaya are hooking up, but don't have sex. And then there's a scene later where Zendaya, after she's married to Mike Feist, are gonna have sex the night before the big match, and then it doesn't happen. And these 2 scenes are great for me because they show how 2 super horny people who are about to have sex can suddenly sort of realize the emptiness of their relationship because something in the sex or the moment is not going right, and how that is such an insurmountable thing to get past in a relationship when that moment of like horniness like crumbles, and then you're just like staring at this person and like all the problems start pouring out. I thought those 2 scenes were handled well. The only problem was, again, this acting style that just goes from point A to point B really quickly and misses a lot of the nuance and gradient in between. And then the other thing is he brings in that fucking EDM pounding score over the end of the scene, and I'm like, why? Don't you trust your actors? Don't you trust the dialogue? Save it, baby. I've already heard it 20 times. By the end of the movie, I was audibly groaning.
I don't even know what to do with that. It's just like I guess, you know, the boring like not good podcast version is like, I guess we disagree, but let me push back on a couple of your points.
Let's find.
I just disagree. First of all, the time jumps, they work. They were totally clear. It ping ponged back and forth like a tennis match, so to speak. Also, what Brett's talking about, like following the tennis match, like maybe you just don't know how fucking tennis works. It was very simple to follow. It was incredibly straightforward. In fact, they literally, like you said, wrote it on the screen the whole entire time. I had no problem following it. Yeah, like if you couldn't follow it, then you just either A, are probably too busy staring at your phone, or B, just don't know the fucking rules of tennis.
You know who didn't need to provide text for every time jump? Steven Soderbergh in The Limey. It's doable.
It's not a sports movie. Or whatever. It's a totally different. How am I supposed to argue that? Yeah, okay. Steven Soderbergh didn't use that in The Limey, but I actually found that this to be a great sports movie. It has what a lot of sports movies don't have, which is it's fucking exciting like a sports game the whole entire time, and the tension builds. And just like in a sports game, oh, there goes Kyle Lowry, and he pushed a little bit off of whoever's on the stupid Knicks, Jalen Brunson, and oh, now Jalen Brunson's a little bit more mad. And this movie is a tale of sex told through bites of churros and like
a tale of sex told by an idiot. To quote the Bard, eyes
going back and forth. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what Brett's saying when he says that this movie isn't sexy. Like that, I don't know what Brett needs in order to feel sexiness. But like,
Zendaya
maybe you should like
the two guys are sexy. That alone does not equate to the movie itself being sexy.
You know, I had to turn down my antidepressants too, to increase my sex drive. You might want to take a look at that. Then, like, who watches Challengers and is like, that wasn't hot. It was hot. Like, I don't know what we need. Do we need to fucking see them Eiffeling towering her for fucking 30 minutes? And do you need to see fucking cum all over the screen? What do you need, weirdo?
It was children like mimicking sexiness the whole time.
Look, if the sex of the threesome seems jejune to you or whatever, it seemed timid, it's because they were 18-year-olds, two of the guys that obviously have more than just friendship, some sort of sexual tension between them, that don't know how to activate it, is immediately seen by this woman, and she very much is into their weird, they love each other, they don't know they love each other, they want to fuck each other, they don't know that they already have sort of dynamic, and she just teases and teases through that scene. But it is important to remember that at that part in the movie, which they had words up on the screen, that showed you what year it was or whatever. They were 18 years old. Like, they shouldn't have had some sort of like dynamic, developed threesome situation fucking put down. The fact that Zendaya could control it so much showed how smart Tashi was and how pointed she was. I thought that scene was incredibly sexy. It wasn't incredibly climactic sexually, and because they're just a bunch of fucking kids.
I agree with everything you just said, and that's why I don't think it was sexy, but it was aspiring, I think, to sexiness, and that's why I think it gets sort of lost in the middle. I would have liked them maybe to play more into the humiliation, more into the sort of awkwardness of it, but it seemed like it was constantly getting lost in the middle. That it was almost like it felt an obligation to like high sexiness, like high level.
I don't know if it was an obligation, but it was certainly a striving for.
And look, this is also a movie I also wonder. I mean, I know how to watch movies. I watched it with
I know you know how to watch
I watched
movies.
It with like a clean slate.
But do you know how to watch tennis?
I know how to watch it with a clean slate. I used to play tennis. I watched it with a clean slate, but this was one of the movies where the marketing campaign is so prominent beforehand, and the sort of hype around the movie is so prominent that I wonder if that played a little bit into my anticipations around the movie.
I understand. Yeah. I think it's still like, I think there is all of the, like, there's all the like extracurricular sexual activities, like maybe things that like we don't delight in, like these power games. Like, this seems to be a major kink for Zendaya in the picture, and like that's not like our bag necessarily. But like, I like a movie about beautiful, crazy, athletic, like rich Adonises all obsessing about power sexually, and I found it to be very like fun to watch, and it made me be like, oh. And then I like the status shifting between them when Josh O'Connor comes to visit Mike in the sauna, and all of his like childish, sophomoric dick swinging turns in. Mike finally stands up for himself and like lashes him with his tongue and tells him what a little boy he is and leaves. That shift, that is like its own sort of sex move in and of itself, and the constant shifting status and the constant shifting dynamics between the three. It's just titillating and exciting, and I totally found it to be engrossing, and I liked the sports element of the movie. I don't know if Brett's like wrong that they're throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall of a sports movie but I think that it's a very gay sports movie, and it's very fun to watch them throw it at the
on paper. I love all this on paper. I'm wearing a fucking tennis outfit. I want to look like Richie Tenenbaum.
No, for sure, you're wearing a tennis outfit.
Movie.
Yeah.
Like, the Power Games is very interesting because, again, that would work for me on paper. The threesome on paper works for me. The issue is, and I can give you a very specific example, is because we also watched Being John Malkovich this week
which was interesting similarly.
Yes,
yeah.
for Weekend at Bergman's, which is coming on after Movies Baby if you're on the Patreon. Catherine Keener in Being John Malkovich is like, if I could have got a little bit more of that from Zendaya, I think a lot would have worked. I give you one specific example. They're doing the big 3 kiss. Oh my god! I've never heard of sex before. I think it's so
Brett,
sexy.
how many times in the movie theaters do you go and see very famous Zendaya making out with 2 guys? It's fun. It's fun. He didn't write like, here's my sexual manifesto and here's what I'm going to like demand you all get off.
The movies are going to be like now. I guess I never get to be horny again in the cinema.
What are you talking? I don't understand.
Thanks a lot,
it's the
Gen
opposite.
Z.
This is the opposite. This isn't. First of all, this movie's not made by Gen Z.
I know.
Second of all,
I'm kidding.
This movie is sexy.
All right, but here's the thing, okay? So
how
you can't be sexy though if you're not hitting the beats, okay? Because it's still a movie. I'm not sitting there fucking jacking off in the theater. I'm watching a movie.
Remember the Love Lies Bleeding guy? Remember the picture of that guy?
Yes, I do. Yes, right. Yeah. So all of this is we're talking about watching a movie, right? This is all going on in my head.
Yes.
So my brain is not going to lock into sexiness if the beats are not hitting, okay? Because that's the pleasure of it for me, is that the character beats have to be working as well, right?
Okay.
In a movie like this. And when Zendaya, so they go in for the big 3 kiss, right? The big 3-person kiss, and that we all heard about 100 times. And then I like this move. She leans back, and then they're just kissing each other like passionately,
hardcore. It's
right?
great. Yeah,
and
that's
it's
awesome.
all their sort of homoerotic longing is coming out in a sort of like sanctioned way that doesn't make them feel gay or whatever they're worried about. All that worked. But then Zendaya leans back on the bed, and they cut to her, and she sort of smiles, and it just doesn't hit the right note for me. It is sort of a like corny young actor trying to sort of be a little Lady Macbethy or something, and it just plays as silly, and then the whole thing falls apart, and I'm like, this is just at every level, this is kids aspiring to something beyond them, both not just in the movie itself, but also the actors themselves. And I did not, if I could got a little more of that Catherine Keener edge from Being John Malkovich in Zendaya's performance, I think it would have made the whole fucking engine click for me, but I don't get it, and so I don't like the movie.
Hey, you know what? Here's Catherine Keener in Being John Malkovich is like a woman. Sorry to be weird, but then Zendaya is like a young woman in this movie. So like she's not like the object of our desire, so to speak. Like she's insanely beautiful. No one's arguing that. Like so I hear what you're saying, but like I just like foundational. Like I think that you're saying, oh, these kids are acting like kids. And I think what I'm just saying is like they are kids and they're also kids in the movie. And that's sort of like the pleasure here. Or like their youthfulness is like what's interesting here. And if it didn't work for you, that's totally fine. But I think that like I think that Luca knows they're kids, and that's where he gets all of his fun, and you can just do with that what you will, whatever you think of Luca.
So, but the problem with Luke is always because there's another version of this movie where Luke is just like, all right, let's pump the brakes. This isn't going to be my masterpiece, but let's sort of back away and do Cruel Intentions. Let's like back up and do Cruel
Brett,
Intentions, right?
You think one can simply just do Cruel Intentions?
But let's aspire more to that,
okay.
right? But the whole movie constantly is not aspiring to that. It's aspiring to something closer to art house cinema, and so my expectations are going to be higher. Basically, what this comes down to is, and look, hey, take a swing all day, baby. John Starks, keep shooting. I'm not going to blame you for. I love that this movie exists. I love what it was attempting to do. I love it on paper.
Okay.
All of that. I'm not mad. I'm not mad. It's not like it's like not. It's not like we're getting the 18th Marvel movie of the year, and I'm pissed that the movie exists. I love that this movie exists. I love that it topped the box office this week. All of that, but ultimately, for what it was aspiring to, it was a miss.
Okay.
That's what I'm gonna say. That's what I'm gonna say.